Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Kerbal spacecraft 11... Okay, that didn't happen in Star Trek. Let's give that another try. Space, the final frontier. Yeah, that didn't quite work either, did it? Fine then, to infinity and beyond! Or possibly not. Yeah, so I think you've got the idea now. It turns out that building spaceships isn't quite as easy as it looks, but it certainly is fun to do. And to be fair, failing is kind of half the fun too. So, on a more serious note, welcome to the Kerbal Space Program, a game which is sure to delight and frustrate in equal measures. There's 3 modes: Career, Science and Free Play. In each of these modes you can also set the difficulty level, which will affect things like the cost of components and upgrades, the amount of re-entry friction and the speed with which your Kerbals respawn, should any have a tragic accident when you strap them into a ton of fuel and light the fuse, which I'm sure carries absolutely no danger whatsoever. So, of the 3 modes, Career mode is the most restrictive but also has the most content, as in the other modes certain elements will be unavailable. In Career and Science mode, you'll start with only a few basic components with which to build your first craft. You can do this by dragging and dropping components from the left-hand side and then assigning a pilot to fly it. To unlock more components, you'll have to perform experiments and accumulate science points. In the early game, you can do this without even lifting off the ground by taking readings off the launch pad itself. This may seem like cheating, but trust me, you won't get far with the default components anyway. For each experiment completed, you'll gain a certain amount of science points. Now, these diminish greatly if you perform the same experiment twice in the same conditions, so if you're hoping to grind those points, you better think again. In Career and Science mode, you can spend those points by accessing the research tree. Here you can unlock new rocket components and new experimentation equipment. Just be sure to remember when making your selection that the only way to accumulate new science points is to carry out new experiments or ones in new conditions. If you focus on only developing rocket components, then you may find that your generation of science points will dry up, leaving you with nothing to unlock further components. In Career mode, you'll also have access to contracts. Completing contracts will reward you with funds and reputation. The higher your reputation, the better the contracts you'll be offered, and therefore the greater the rewards available. These contracts start real simple, such as launching a ship or testing a component on the launch pad, but they'll quickly get more challenging, such as succeed in orbiting Kerbin or exit Kerbin's atmosphere. Some of the contracts available may be beyond the reach of your current rocket parts, so particularly at the start you need to be careful which ones you take, as by default you can only accept 2 contracts at a time. So you really don't want those slots taken up with contracts you can't yet fulfill. And if you do abandon a contract, then it's gone for good. You can't just re-accept it later. Of course, the completion of a contract isn't just dependent on you achieving the requested goals. You also have to successfully complete the flight. This means landing safely with your command module intact. I pretty quickly discovered that in this game, going up is a hell of a lot easier than getting back down safely, and simply fitting a parachute to your craft doesn't guarantee a safe landing. Each component has a certain stress limit. Set off your parachute too soon and it will just break, so make sure to save some fuel for your descent to slow your craft's re-entry. It's also worth remembering that if any experiments are destroyed on landing, you'll also lose any data it gathered. I find putting a heat shield under your lab generally prevents this happening as long as you have an active parachute. You can also have your Kerbal pilot leave the spaceship, which can allow you to carry out further experiments such as soil samples. Just be aware that if you do this out in space, your Kerbal may lose grip on the ship and be left floating off into space. While it is possible to send out a rescue party, it's a hard task even to aim for Kerbin's moon successfully, let alone find a Kerbal floating in space. If this all sounds like too much hard work, then you can just play in free play mode, in which you can build rockets and planes to your heart's content with no strings attached. Overall, the Kerbal Space Program is a really fun, if fairly complex game. It will take a while to get to grips with it, but the effort is well worth it. I'd like to assure you that no Kerbals were harmed in the making of this review.